Perhaps we could sit together for a while. We've got this topic, right? Poetry, community, and a life of caring and sharing. And I was thinking this morning, poetry, I guess, probably derives from poiesis, some ancient Greek thing, which means creativity. It's like autopoiesis is like self-creating, right? So out of the kind of this ocean of collaboration that's going on, cellular levels and organ levels and human levels and cultural levels and organization levels and ecosystem levels, right? They're all kind of weaving in and through each other. They are together bringing forth our experience of community. And so actually poetry is not just a peculiar little thing that we tack on and we're taking a little detour from Dharma. Actually poetry is at the total heart of everything. Creation, creativity, this kind of unending flow. And out of that, we create a sense of like a community of 100 trillion cells here, and we call this community Tarchin. Or we call this community New Zealand, or we call this community whatever. Right? But actually, all these communities are kind of illusory-like communities, which are built out of the coming together and the working and the changing, which is the action, if you like. Poetry is very hard to pin down. Right? This is why I like poetry, just speaking very ordinarily, because it's so ambiguous. Right? It allows the possibility of hinting at multiple layerings of understanding and meaning and so on, which seems so much more real than the community that we've seemed to have created, that has been created around us, which is not really that interested in poetry. They're interested in technology, in technique, in as if somehow, there's the right way to do things and it's cut and dry, and then we can approach Dharma as technique and technology, spiritual technology, if you like. But actually, I think to truly live a life of Dharma, we have to approach a life of Dharma as a life of poetry. Okay? And could we come up with a community that's not so much us and them? And I want to mention this at the beginning, because to not mention it, I feel that I might, by omission, right, hint at something to be unimportant. But I want to remember for all of us just the horrific tragedy that's happening in Gaza, right? That's boiling up in the Middle East, that's boiling up in the countries of the world that make their money by making and selling armaments, right? These are communities that fight each other, communities that distrust each other, communities that hate each other, right? This is a serious problem, right? Community that's forgotten the poetry, that's forgotten the kind of the communal nature of community. That you can't have self-nature of community, right? So me, individual, it's always community moving, right? And we see the community of our bodies. They come into being, they thrive for a while, they start to fall apart, right? We see the communities of societies coming, they thrive for a while, they start to fall apart. Right? Could we somehow enter into this mystery that we find ourselves in, which instead of a community of technology and law And just the extraordinary arguments that have gone on in the public domain as to whether or not these are war crimes or not war crimes, as if somehow if they're not technically war crimes, it's okay. Madness, like utter madness. Okay? Could we somehow, perhaps the path of Dharma could be seen as a poetry of community that's based on caring and sharing? I'm just using words to, right? Hence our kind of general umbrella topic, if you like. Okay? So perhaps we could just sit for a few moments and just settle into the fullness of communing that you're capable of. Here, I need a bit more air. Open another, so there's a bit of a flow through. In the immeasurable expanse of nature and process, in faith and trust and wonderment, we give ourselves to this suchness, this seamless mystery. This continuous birthing, dying. Can you see, can you give yourself? Right? Feel this right now, kind of with your elbows. Let your elbows give themselves. Let your knees give themselves. Your ankles, your armpits, your lungs, your face, your whole body, your whole mind, everything just releasing into this fullness, which is much vaster than anything we can pin down. Spacious, loving, with feet solid in the earth. We nurture the hints of blessedness, the myriad faces and masks of luminous knowing. Moving as this flow of compassion and deepening inquiry, we engage with all beings in ways that support the integrity, the stability, and the beauty of the entire field of life and living. We take refuge in love and clear seeing. We live courageously in this world of birthing and dying. Our hearts embrace all companions on this path of lucidity and freedom. For the sake of all beings, wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. Sadhu. I'd like to, because this is the first time we've gathered together for a number of months now, and in between time we've been down to Wangapeka and had a marvelous retreat, and we've been back here to Oregon, right? And actually yesterday we've been sort of, how can I put it, effortlessly involved with the production of a short film. I'm saying this because we were effortfully involved with it for 3 days before Christmas. And then meanwhile editors and filmmakers and were working like crazy to distill 3 days of filming down to a 17-minute film that is somehow cohesive and says something worthwhile. And actually just yesterday in Nelson, they had the premiere at the Nelson Buddhist Center. And it will be live on YouTube, I think, in 1 more week. And so this is, again, it was like a gathering, a creative work in which all sorts of beings gave their absolute best to it. The 2 figures in the film were Kelvin and myself. And so we've been giving our best to it all along. But the person who did the filming was giving his best to it. The person who was sort of looking at the whole thing and saying, what kind of film could we put out of this, is giving their best to it. Right? And in a sense, the end product was something that no one was utterly in control of. And it was a wonderful exercise in collaborative activity based on extraordinary amount of trust. Right? No one was kind of bending over saying, no, you can't do that, oh, you can't do this. It's like, it was like amazing. Didn't know how on earth they were going to distill. How can you do this? Take all these hours of filming and me chatting away as I do. And the first time I watched it, I was kind of acutely aware of everything that was left out. I've never had anything to do with making a film before, so it's been a new experience. And then the second time I looked at it, I realized all of a sudden I was looking at it from the point of view of me and my contribution to the film, and all these important, inspiring things that I said, which were left out. And they kind of completely, God, And then I looked at it again and I saw that actually the skill in the filmmakers by kind of intimation of a visual image and music and just a few words, they hinted. It was kind of like multi-dimensional poetry, right? Giving rise, and I realized actually they managed to sort of touch on everything in a way that looked kind of seamless, and yet nobody said that. And because they chopped and, I mean, this is a big, I talked for an hour and a half and they snip, snip, glue this to here and glue this to there and then flip it over to there and flip it over to there. And it's like, to me, it was like a beautiful example of how life works. Right? I mean, our hearts are just busy doing heart business. They're not saying, feet, is it okay if I do this? Right? Our kidneys are busy doing kidney business, and they're not necessarily sort of going to, liver, is this okay? Or liver says, no, you can't do that, you have to do this. And as one being, one participant in the community shifts something, the others shape and adapt and so on. And this large-scale aspiration, and I was touched by the film was based around the book Something Beautiful for the World, and one of the filmmakers was doing a retreat at Wangapeka and just happened to see the book in the library and thought, oh, this could make an amazing film, and so that began the process. But they're making a series of films with 3 other filmmakers from South Africa and filmmakers from Sweden, and Happen Films, which is based down in Golden Bay. And they're collaborating on a 3-year project, and they're bringing out a series of films, 1 per month, right? With the aspiration that it's like touching on people's lives who are living creative, decent lives, contributing to the welfare and the well-being of others, right? This is like what the series is about. And they asked, and of course I'm kind of absolutely delighted to actually take the title of the book, Something Beautiful for the World, and make it the title for the entire series. Right? And so this is another thing that's sort of come up. We're often engaged in creative work without even knowing we're engaged in creative work. I'd like to just take a few moments before we I confess that part of the title also, without thinking about it, was running out of ideas of what we're going to do for these Sundays, because we keep on going on and on and on. And I thought, oh, I know. Well, I can always pull out a poem and read a poem and springboard off from that. It makes it easy for me. But actually, these gatherings are not for me. They're for all of us. Right? And so I want to make lots of space as we go along, right, for people to perhaps share something of the journey that they're wrestling with, because we wrestle with our journeys, right? And, the kind of reality of living well in this world, which is in many ways extraordinarily challenging, and both emotionally and intellectually and physically. Right? How do we do this? Right? And so I'd like to just take a few moments now. I'm not expecting anything in particular, but to see if there are any kind of particular topics or themes that you would be interested in exploring over the next few gatherings together. Of course, I've brought poems for you, and right, we can fill the whole morning up with this. But both from people on the screen and also people in the room, we'll sit quietly for a few moments and just allow a space and see if something's coming up that's really moving you, that you really feel that you would like to, we could inquire into together more deeply. if anyone on the screen does want to offer something, you have to wave like crazy and then unmute yourself. Yeah.
I'm exploring the theme of how to live well in a crowded and confusing world. My wonderful green neighbours sent me a text asking if they could pick some of my feijoas. So I went round to their house, and the lady was having a talk and someone else in the driveway, and got a fright to see me walk in. And I'm her neighbour, and they were more comfortable texting me to ask permission to come onto my land than they were sharing a space with a neighbour in person, which I thought was kind of summed up a certain situation in the planetary consciousness at present. And these are not enemies, these are friends. I'm hoping that we could have a planet where that kind of sharing was virtually automatic. Because the goodwill is there.
Yeah.
Actually, the goodwill is there in everybody, it's just not necessarily manifesting right now.
Hutchin, it's Anna talking on the internet here.
Yes. I'm trying to find you. Oh, there you. No. Wave. I'm trying to. Oh, there you are. Good.
My ears perked up when I heard you say just before about working on this film as a collaborative process, and how in the end it was something about just releasing into trust, and no one's actually fully in control of anything. And I'm really, really interested in this because of a personal situation I'm involved in. Where I'm finding I keep getting hooked into expectations of outcomes, and when that happens, it raises anxiety, and the mind can go into a worrying place. Whereas I'm sort of really wanting to get better at doing my best, put my best foot forward, make my best effort, and then relax and release and trust the process. So I'm really, that's an edge that I'm been working with for quite some time, actually.
I guess we could call this the art of living.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. Yes.
It'd be nice there's some emphasis on lightness and spaciousness.
Well, we're doing our best. We got all the lights. Yeah. Bill. Yeah.
Hi, Touch. And I'm still interested in the same question I asked at the last class on the net, which is about communication, like the liberation. We talk about the liberation of body, speech, and mind, and I'm just so interested in speech and skillful speech, and when, and in engaging in conversation, like the whole idea of clarity or even compassion, and like speaking. I mean, like for someone like myself who's had a really extraordinary education, I mean, words are a big deal, and the skillful nature of communication is something that I like. That's the poetry of communication, even when it's prose, is so. It's that, there's something about it that has some beauty, but the meaning of it and how we liberate each other in our engagement and in our community is so profound and so important, it seems to me. And then there's and some people don't have the benefit of a massive education and are trying to communicate skillfully as best they can. And so this whole thing, the whole interconnection and interrelatedness that is through the vehicle of speech seems to me to be such a profound mystery, and how we cultivate it and like the whole Gaza situation and so on. And I mean, it just seems communication and the way it's being distorted, and how do we I just think the mystery of how we engage with others skillfully and with clarity and uplifting the world is such a profound mystery. And yeah, that's where that's an edge that's where I'm at the moment. Yeah.
These questions, when they're really big questions, they don't have a lot to do with answers. They've got a lot to do with being willing to hold the question, and to in a sense like move and shift and change in response to what we're finding when we're holding the question. Right? This is something which, we're, again, I pointed the finger, if you like, at technology and technique as opposed to poetry and kind of more kind of dynamic, fluid, and so on, right? But with language, we can have this. We have a sense that we're talking to each other, and we somehow, not only are we obsessed with the idea of the technique and how to do this, but we're obsessed with getting an answer to the question, as if there was a correct answer to the question, right? If we could just have more laws or something, or the right laws, or what have you, because laws sort of trying to solidify answers. When in actual fact, the question itself, right? Somehow in our culture, we often feel that to be dwelling in a state of question is to somehow be dwelling in a state of unfinishedness or lack or something missing. Because, if you were smart, you'd get the answer. You'd know the result, right? You'd know what to do. But surely we're all mature enough beings to have experienced myriad times in the course of our life not knowing what to do, in spite of our best intention and so forth, right? And so maybe we could start to see this actually as something that's fundamental to Dharma, right? Is somehow to be able to be holding this as somehow communication is important, right? We could get all terribly conceptual about this, but just in a very general way, it's very, very important. And realizing that when we communicate is different than I communicate. Because we often forget, we always think we're talking about you're not communicating clearly, or am I communicating clearly? Whereas actually we're as Maturana beautifully put it, right? We're languaging together, right? We're whole, in a sense, like when we're communicating, we're engaging in something, and not only are we engaging something with each other, but our sweat glands are engaging in the conversation. I'm trying to point out that the whole of our being is languaging. It's not just kind of cipher words that come out that can be translated in a dictionary, right? And so the question is like, why am I communicating? Am I communicating because I want a better world? I'm trying to participate in this communication for a better world. But might it be possible that I could allow the possibility that the being that I'm communicating with is also aspiring for a better world. And holding the question, how might we do this well together, rather than it's either your world or my world, right? As if somehow this is the only way there is. Right? We're in this, whether we like it or not. Right? I got some poems for you today that just absolutely dwell on this, but we have to go through and see a few more people. Meredith, were you?
Yeah. Good morning, Touch, and good morning, everybody. Greetings from Sydney. I would be really keen at some point over these classes to explore death as a theme. I don't particularly have a formulated question for people who don't know me. My background is I'm a advanced cancer patient. I was recently in hospital. I had a huge surgery, and it was a cancer specialist hospital, so I saw a lot of death in process. It was very confronting. And then 2 months ago, my mother died. It's just become a really overwhelming theme for me, and it's something I'd really love to explore. That's really it, really. Yeah. I suppose I could say I just can't, I'm just in this state where I feel I just don't understand it, and I'm not comfortable with even knowing that I couldn't understand it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's basically where I'm at. Yeah. Thank you.
Obviously, this is a huge topic,
Yeah.
but I'd like to make just one little quibby remark back now, right? Because years ago, I think it was Tricycle Magazine, you know, the Buddhist magazine, it comes out of America, and they devoted an entire issue to the question of death and dying. And one of the things in the Tricycle Magazine that they did then was that they prepared a number of questions to ask eminent Buddhist practitioners from different schools, like Zen practitioners and Tibetan practitioners and Theravadan, Burmese Vipassana practitioners, and the whole range. And they asked them all the same questions, and then you could see the different answers, right? And everyone was they'd say, well, what happens when you die? It's a long time ago since I can't remember exactly the question. It was something like that. And so most of the people, give a fairly long, sort of thoughtful, compassionate kind of answer to it in detail. The Tibetan lamas gave the most extensive. They gave it like incredible. You go into this bardo, and then you go into that bardo, and then this turns on, and this goes on, and and then this happens, and this happens, and then fantastic, right? And then they came to a Korean Zen monk, right? And they said to him, "What happens when you die?" And he said, "I don't know. I'm not dead yet." That was the end of his answer, right? And I went inside. I went, yes! So I suppose you can only explore living. You can only explore living. I don't know, and the thing is that if you're dead, the definition of death is not living. So therefore, you don't have to worry too much about it. Because our business is living, and if you're living in the bardo, that's still living. It's like you're living. So in some of the traditions, particularly in the Zen tradition, we'll talk about the unborn or the deathless, right? As these are kind of poetic hints at maybe a way of being which gets so broad that somehow the traditional way of questioning this, as if you go along like this, and then boom, end, stop. At the end of the class, I push the leave button, and you all vanish off the screen, right? But somehow that's not very satisfactory for almost everyone,
No.
right? We need a bigger story to make sense of this. That's partly what we're doing here. Right? Chuck, you're...
I am exploring older topics, and several sessions ago you said ask yourself how can all of me be there for all of you?
What would it mean for all of me to be present
I
with
am
and for?
exploring how it would be for all of me to be here for the whole planet,
Mm.
for Mother Earth.
Mm.
It's somewhat mind-boggling, because the Earth is just really, there's a lot happening, obviously, and it's a tremendous contemplation for me just to look at. I've just been where my feet touch, and now it's a very expansive way of questioning.
Oh, Tony, Tony Dix is waving there?
Hi, Tarchin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, if you wanted to go ahead and respond to that, that's fine, and you come back to me if you like.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was watching a film recently, and the narrator quoted something, and I went back over it and wrote it down, and you'll probably know who this is. Most people will know who this is, but I thought it was very, very interesting. Thus, from the war of nature, famine, and death, the most exalted object we are capable of conceiving, mainly the production of higher animals, directly follows. There is grandeur in this view of life, that whilst the planet has gone in cycling on according to the fixed laws of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved. Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species. Thanks, Tarja.
I've brought for you this morning, I'd like to, I've got heaps of, I'll draw on lots of poetry which has kind of emerged in this living, but I'd actually like to begin with a poem by David Whyte. And I came across this one quite a few years ago, and I was trying to find where it is. I mean, you can find it on the internet now. The copy of it's not in any of the books of his poems that I've got. Somewhere I came across it years ago, and it really struck me strongly then, and it strikes me strongly now. And I'd like to go through this with you slowly in a kind of contemplative fashion, and we might have to go through it twice, okay? Because one of the things that poetry, and let me make a little aside here, is that I really would like to encourage people to write poetry, right? All of you, okay? I mean, some of you perhaps have written a bit of poetry before, but what I'm suggesting is like, keep a little notebook, right? It's not a diary or anything like that, but it's just a kind of a notebook. And, sometimes you're working on a question, you're holding a question, and suddenly a kind of a fresh way of being with this question emerges for you in a way that doesn't, it's too hard to kind of nail it down with prose or anything. You don't have to have... For me, poetry started off as an act of laziness. You see, I was too lazy to write complete sentences. It was too hard to get the paragraph together, right? So I'd write this kind of flow of consciousness kind of paragraph, and sometimes without punctuation. And then I thought, I know, I could rearrange it, and it looks like a poem and becomes a poem, right? But, don't worry about, this is not poems for somebody else. This is poems for you. These are like messages in a bottle. And you put them in a bottle, right? And you throw them into the sea with the aspiration that they'll wash up on the shore and some kind of abandoned, shipwrecked sailor will find the bottle and get this message, knowing that the abandoned, shipwrecked sailor is you later on in life, walking on the shore of your beach, and you find a message in the bottle written from you, right? Back in a time when there was a kind of, and you went, ah, thanks, right? It's like somehow to allow your own wisdom to work for you, because we all have gems of wisdom, gems of kind of recognition, and then they're kind of gone. And actually it'd be really useful to have them when they're not there and we need them. And so I found in my life that I've jotted down a lot of my writings and books and so on have flowed out from just keeping a kind of track. Sometimes I don't write anything for months and months, and sometimes I get on a kind of a Zen sickness flow and I just can't stop writing them. And they're not, and I found gradually, yes, I did start to share them with people, but I have this kind of format in my life. And not everyone has this kind of format in their life. We all have our own kind of situation and so on. But actually much more to the point is for me, I read them and go, oh, right? Did I write that? Oh, this seems really good. Okay. So this poem from David Whyte, right, is called Faces at Braga. And it's quite often a poem is sort of sometimes an extended metaphor. So you have a kind of there's different layers that are happening in the poem. There's a kind of an outer layer and an inner layer, if you like. And so in this one I can see very clearly we've got, I think many of you will see it, there's two layers that are going on, and I'm going to throw in my 2 cents worth and emphasize this as we go. Okay? So see if you can settle into a place of openness and receptivity, and allow an appreciation of the rhythms of your breathing to be with you. It's kind of like you come into a place of stillness, to just allow these words to kind of shimmer in your experience. In the monastery darkness, by the light of one flashlight, the old shrine room waits in silence. While above the door we see the terrible figure, fierce eyes demanding, "Will you step through?" And the old monk leads us, bent back, nudging blackness, prayer beads in the hand that beckons. We light the butter lamps and bow, eyes blinking in the pungent smoke. Look upward without a word. See faces in meditation. 100 faces carved above, eye lines wrinkled in the handheld light. Such depth in solid wood, taken from the hillsides and carved in silence. They have the vibrant stillness of those who made them. Engulfed by the past, they have been neglected. But through smoke and darkness, they are like the flowers we have seen growing through the dust of eroded slopes, their slowly opening faces turned towards the mountain, carved in devotion. Their eyes have softened through age, and their mouths curve through delight of the carver's hand. If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hand to bring the deep grain of love to the surface. If only we knew, as the carver knew, how the flaws in the wood led his searching chisel to the very core, we would smile too, and not need faces immobilized by fear and the weight of things undone. When we fight with our failing, we ignore the entrance to the shrine itself and wrestle with the guardian, fierce figure on the side of good. And as we fight, our eyes are hooded with grief, and our mouths are dry with pain. If only we could give ourselves to the blows of the carver's hands, the lines in our faces would be the trace lines of rivers feeding the sea, where voices meet, praising the features of the mountain and the cloud and the sky. Our faces would fall away until we, growing younger toward death, every day would gather all our flaws in celebration, to merge with them perfectly, impossibly wedded to our essence, full of silence from the carver's hands. He took a group of people on a trek to Nepal, and they found an old temple, and there was an old monk there, and he went in, and this is where it kind of inspired, if you like, this. I'd like to read it again, only this time add some comments or thoughts. I have no idea if this is how David Whyte would interpret or speak about his poem, but I don't think he would mind. Right? I think he throws these out, offerings to the world, and we do with them as we do with them. In the monastery darkness, by the light of one flashlight, the old shrine room waits in silence. Does the monastery, the oneness, the completeness, there's the monastery of the world, the monastery of your life, right? By the flashlight of your curiosity, of your intelligence, of your looking, it's illumined, right? This is like pith instruction for meditation. Right? The old shrine, it's ancient, right? The DNA in my body has been sort of going on unbroken from creature to creature to creature for billions of years. And now it's manifesting this way, right? It's an old shrine room. It feels like a young shrine room in a way, but it's also an ancient shrine room. Can you realize that this monastery in which you live is ancient? And can you begin to illumine it with the flashlight, right? Of not your kind of intense focus, but the flashlight of your love and your curiosity and your wonderment. This is how we illumine. This is the core of meditation work. This is how all of me, present with and for and in and through all of you. If I don't have the flashlight, right? If I'm not illumining this, I might be in it. I have absolutely no idea it's there. Right? while above the door, like stepping into this. It's like quite often when people just settle in, they go, yeah, but what am I going to do? Should I watch my breath? How long should I watch my breath? Should I count? Should I visualize this? Is there a mantra I can do? How long do I have to practice this? How often should I practice this? You know, the whole thing is like in people's minds as if it's some kind of technique instead of, you know, it's kind of, you know, how often do I have to do this? Well, what you do is you enter into the old shrine room and you never leave. Right? You should only meditate once in your life. You start and you never stop. It's for the rest of your life. It's ongoing. Right? And so we kind of, at the threshold though, it's a bit scary. Am I wasting my time? Am I doing the right thing? Right? Above the door we see the terrible figure, fierce eyes demanding, will you step, are you going to be nuts and just do this meditation? Yeah, but what about my job? Or what about my responsibilities? And what about this and that and the other? I can't just live a life of poetry and wisdom and compassion, and it's all very well for kind of Buddhist monks who've got nothing else to do. Right? We got kind of things. I got to do my tax returns. I've got to do my this. I've got to organize this. I've got a meeting with the bank manager about my mortgage. I've got this, that, or the other. Right? These are the the demons. You know, in the Tibetan tradition. You know, and many of you will be familiar with them. And you know, they'll have kind of this kind of yama, kind of fierce demon that's there. These are not demons that are out there out to get you, and it's kind of scary, and they're trying to put you off truth. These are the demons of the bank manager. These are the demons of your worry. These are the demons of our kind of fussing and grasping, and you get this, right? And they're scary. Right? The idea that will you walk through into the fullness of your life? Or are you just going to stand outside? Right? So you're always on the outside. Not only are you outside your life, but you can't walk through into the fullness of anyone else's life. While above the door we see the terrible figure, fierce eyes demanding. What's the terrible figure for you? What is this? Can you see it, right? This door. It's right when you're just about to really enter into it. Oh, well, I really need to do a long, deep retreat. Right? Next year, I'm going to do a big retreat. Right? Well, I don't know if I've got the time for it, you know, or I can really do this. It's like, when are we going to step through the door? Right? It's scary in the monastery because it's a monastery. Mono. You know, I'm playing with the word a little bit, right? And yeah, but who's going to go with me? No. If you go with somebody else, it's a multi-stery. You know? Right? You know, this meditation is like, it's a monastery. Right? And the old monk leads us. I wonder if the old monk, where's the old monk in your life? Right? That kind of hints of ancient wisdom that are kind of guiding us. Do we know? And I'm not talking about, you know, the old monk is like remembering, so-and-so Rinpoche, or, right? There's some other out there old monk that's guiding us. You know, a book, a method, a technique, a school. No, this is not the old monk. Is the whole thing's happening inside the meditator. Where's your old monk? This ancient bodhicitta, this ancient kind of curiosity and interest and engagement with life and living. Okay? And the old monk leads us. Bent back, nudging blackness. Prayer beads in hands that beckon. Says, come. And you go, oh yeah. This is partly, you know, you write your poetry and put it in a bottle and throw it in the ocean, right? And these are and then you go, oh, a message from the old monk. Right? maybe your kind of intelligence at an earlier stage in your life. We light butter lamps. Right? Butter lamps are both offerings, but also butter lamps symbolize wisdom. They symbolize clear seeing. They light understanding, knowing. We light butter lamps and bow. Right? We have a sense of like the awe and the respect of entering into the mystery of the monastery of our life. Right? We so often will go into somebody else's monastery and bow there. But the idea that your life was worth reverence, right? Wow, this is extraordinary, right? We bring offerings, right, into our, I can't exhaust, there's not a meaning to this poem. These are kind of hints, there's a lot in it. Right? We light butter lamps and bow, eyes blinking in the pungent smoke. Look up, look out, look beyond, without a word, and we see faces in meditation, memories, thoughts, understandings, hopes, expectations, right? They're all entering. Have you ever done that? You ever sat there and done a bit of anapanasati, a little bit of breathing meditation? I remember the first long 3-month solar retreat I did in Canada at the Beaver Dam. Some of you know the Beaver Dam cabin at Dharma Center. And so it was the middle of the winter, and I'm in this cabin all by myself, and I didn't see anyone for all this time. And I'm going to go in and do a retreat. And the cabin was tiny. I mean, the cabin was about the size of the length of a bed, and not even square. Like maybe 2.5 beds together makes the cabin. It was really tiny little cabin. And I sat in that cabin. I said, I'm going to be totally alone. And I sat in there with 100 million people. My mom was there, my dad was there, Rinpoche was there, right? My friends were there, my girlfriends, my ex-girlfriends, my teachers, and there were not only that, but there were characters out of movies I'd seen, and there were hopes and fears and terrors and so on. And I just sat in there, and I was just blah 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 blah. I begin to enter into it, and I look and I see faces. In meditation, 100 faces carved above, eye lines wrinkled in the handheld light. Sometimes they kind of move the light and the carving. This is a metaphor. It's back and forth between an actual experience of being in a monastery with carved faces in the wood, right? But if you have just a single source of light, it's almost like the facial expression changes depending on how the light comes. So depending on how you look at your experience, you sometimes see it, it looks like this, and then it looks like this, and this is marvelous, and this is boring. And this is like, right, it's like just depending on how you're moving in the hand, because it's a handheld light. It's not a light that's just there, it's just like your habit patterns and so on. You're kind of trying to illumine your way. Such depth in solid wood, taken from the hillsides and carved in silence. Right? I wonder, just kind of recognizing that somehow there's a connection between our life and the hill outside, and the environment, and the trees, and the birds, and the insects, and the microorganisms in the soil, right? They're reflecting through every one that we see, every experience that we have. Engulfed by the past, they have been neglected, right? We just want to get on with our life. We're already fussing with all these kind of doubts and concerns and so on, And when we do have our doubts and concerns, we want to rush off and ask someone how to deal with our doubts and concerns, instead of stepping in through the door into the monastery. This is the path of contemplation, the path of love and clear seeing. carved in devotion, their eyes have softened through age, and their mouths curve through delight of the carver's hands. And we begin to reflect on, like, how did the universe give rise to this experience of me with all these voices, occasional. I remember after about 2 months in there of total bedlam, right? All of a sudden all the voices stopped. And I thought, I'm enlightened. It was such a shock, right? I was the only person in the hut. It took me 2 months to get through the door. Yeah, you're with this, right? And yet when we start to look, then in there we're beginning to like wonder, how does the universe give rise to this? How is the universe, like all the collaborative parts of the filmmaking, right? Only this film is really big, right? There's 100 trillion kind of participants in one adult human body, right? And then we got all the different bugs and creatures and birds and so on, and huge, like, this fullness, this ocean of being. Right? And we're wondering, how does this work? And sometimes we look at this and go, I wonder how the elements work. And you go, this is very interesting. Or you're looking at it from the point of view of mind, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And we have all these different colored lamps, right, for kind of illumining our way as we begin to see the world in different fashion. If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hand to bring the deep grain of love to the surface. Okay? We give ourselves to this suchness, this seamless mystery of birth and dying. We give ourselves to the carver. I suppose some people would say we give ourselves to God. We give ourselves to the mystery.
Can you say that line again, please, teacher?
Which line?
The one you just read.
Oh, right? If only our own faces, not all the faces we're seeing up there, but our own face. What is your, and this is a big one. In Zen they say, what's your true face? Right? It's not simple, right? If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hand to bring the deep grain of love to the surface. Right? We've been, in a sense, it's a metaphor, right? We could have different metaphors. I suppose he could have done one, it was a sculptor instead of a carver, and you might have had adding putty and clay and what have you, and shaping it and molding it. That's a different poem, right? Same life, different poem. Right, but this one is a carver, and the carver's in a sense removing stuff, and so certain things get removed. Right? When we get older, this becomes really obvious. Things get removed. A few retinal cells here and a few retinal cells there, and right, an organ here. Whoops, sorry, that one's cancerous. We'll take it out. Right, you get stuff removed. It's the carver's. Can we surrender to the carver's hand? But is that a loss, or is that bringing the deep? Can it be bringing the deep grain of love to the surface? Imagine there's a deep grain of love in all beings. Right? How can we allow that to be brought to the surface? I think it's a beautiful thing, and it's like physically, mentally. If only we knew, as the carver knew, how the flaws in the wood led his searching chisel to the very core. Right? It's a beautiful. If you've not done wood carving, then you wouldn't necessarily get a sense of the metaphor. but if you've tried a little bit of wood carving, you realize that when you're like pushing the hand chisel along, right, it doesn't necessarily go where you think you'd like it to go. You're not necessarily, it's different to carving a bar of soap. You know, if you've never done carving before, sometimes it's easier to have a block of paraffin or soap or something like that, and you carve that because there's no grain in it. You know what I mean? And you can do anything you like. If you've got the control, you can basically, I can control this. But you see, the carver is not in control. Right? The carver's job is to kind of bring the deep grain of love to the surface, is to kind of, in a sense, like to free up the spirit, if you like. It depends on how the person's speaking, right? It kind of reveals yeah, right. If only we knew, as the carver knew, how the flaws in the wood right? What wonderful flaws. Imagine if you didn't have any flaws. You'd just be a block of soap. It's what makes everyone unique. This is one of the beauties of making shakuhachi flutes, for example, the bamboo flute. And you realize that each culm of bamboo is unique. And you can actually buy, there's a type of shakuhachi flute that you can buy that they make in Japan, and it's out of cast plastic. And every single one is exactly the same. Right? Right? It's kind of, and so you can do this, and they're trying to do it to make a cheap shakuhachi flute for beginners. But when you have a stick of bamboo, each stick is different, and so you can't impose the shape on the stick. There's already a kind of inherent natural kind of flow which is absolutely unique in the universe. You want to know what it is? Just look. That's it. Absolutely unique. Right? No one's ever been like you. No one will ever be like you again. Right? And so then the chisel of life, right? You go, oh, I'm going to go this way. Life goes, oh, you're going this way. Right? Nobody chooses to go cancer way. You know, I think I'll do cancer just for a kind of some amusement. I don't have anything else to do. Nobody chooses that. But many people go the cancer way. And many people actually mature and flower as good human beings through their meeting with that. Right? It's extraordinary. It's like we need the kind of the flaws in the grain, right? If we knew this, we would smile too, and not need faces immobilized by fear and the weight of things undone. Right? When we fight with our failing, we ignore the entrance to the shrine itself. Right? Just stop. Come back to, have a few supports to help you. Maybe smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, offering. Just stop. Breathe. Smiling, breathing, present. There's plenty. Right? To stop into the monastery. The second you stop, you've clicked the light and your flashlight's turned on. Right? The stopping is the starting of the flashlight. When we fight with our failing, we ignore the entrance to the shrine itself and wrestle with the guardian, fierce figure on the side of good. these kind of scary details of our life, of challenges and so on, are actually on the side of good if we start to go, yes, I'm here for you. How does this work? And you're like they're kind of, yes, they can scare you from going in, but if you go in, right, these become the talents that you bring to your life and living. These are the struggles that you, in a sense, what value can we share with others? And maybe one of the things of value that we can share with others is simply to be willing to share the result of our struggles, which have led us to a deepening understanding or a sense of more kind of solidity. We don't know how they're going to do it, but it's doable. And as we fight, our eyes are hooded with grief and our mouths are dry with pain. And this yearning in the poem, if only we could give ourselves to the blows of the carver's hands. The lines in our faces would be trace lines of rivers feeding the sea, the ocean of beingness. Where voices meet, praising the features of mountain and cloud and sky. Our faces would fall away until we, growing younger towards death, the Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava in the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism is sometimes referred to as the eternal child. Right, the eternal child in the lotus. This is the primordial guru figure, if you like. That which teaches us is this kind of eternal freshness. This moment has never been, it's like it's being freshly born, moment by moment by moment by moment, right? And so we, strangely enough, we grow younger, because at the beginning it's like you're getting old. Some of you are getting old, I can tell. Right, we're getting old, and occasionally I moan about that myself. I confess, right? Kind of getting old and starting to fall apart, and then suddenly, fortunately, I seem to be, I've thrown so many messages into bottles and thrown it into the sea so many times over the years that it doesn't seem to be very many minutes before a clink, 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 and all of a sudden another bottle washes up at my feet, and I pick it up and go, oh yeah. Thanks, how did I forget? Right? Because I realized this isn't, am I growing old? Or is this the absolute ever-fresh presentation of the current moment of knowing arising? It's not old. It's brand new. This kind of macular degeneration is new. This is new, right? There's like and it changes everything when you have that. And this is something it's an edge that you might find, right? Can you begin to see this? Our faces would fall away until we, growing younger toward death, every day would gather all our flaws in celebration to merge with them perfectly, impossibly, wedded to our essence, full of silence from the carver's hands. Right? And all the way through there's this reference to the silence of the carver's hand, carved in silence, like it pops up through. And it's like in the silence, it's not an answer, it's just silent. And can I kind of share occasionally when I find myself living a little bit more in this space, when the juice that's behind this poem seems to be vibrant and alive with me. Right? I'm trying to speak on your behalf. This is your words, right? Can I engage with others in ways that allows that vibrancy to shine. Just when you allow a moment of stillness like this, you can see how you kind of oscillate on the threshold. And sometimes you step through. But sometimes you think you just have a whole lot of thoughts rattling around, which is just sort of keeping you right there on the, it's kind of like the not stepping through. Would anyone care to share any observation or thought or resonance that's coming up for you from sort of glimpsing this mystery that David White is trying to share with people?
Touching, it's Anna here.
Yes, yeah.
I was transported back to decades ago, sitting at the Wangapeka in the whare where you were teaching from the Mahamudra poem. It just felt the same thing going on here. It was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this and your thoughts around the essence of this poem.
Great. We have these wonderful teachings that have wonderful names. So you have things like Mahamudra, because, oh, it's Mahamudra, and so on. But actually Mahamudra is just this. It's just like entering into this. And sometimes we spend so much time kind of studying the kind of the outer, what to call it, you know, like the methods and the decoration that goes around the outside, and whether you're interested in Mahamudra or not. I mean, how can you not be interested in the great? Namgyal once made a little punny kind of joke on Mahamudra, and he said Mahamudra, he said is you could better understand it if you said, because everyone understood Maha means great or vast or that kind of thing. But don't say Mahamudra, say Mahamuvra. It's like the great moving, the great dancing of this whole creative process. And Mahamudra is not a Tibetan thing. It's a word that got associated with Tibetan teachings when they tried to name this universal, profound place of love and clear seeing. Okay? So, yeah, this David White's poem was Mahamudra, pith instruction, and they never said the word.
Lately I've been, noticing how much I story the world into being from a kind of a narrow, well, not a narrow-minded, but a sort of a I'm always storying things as if my story were the right one, sort of thing. And so in the loosening up of that, I've been kind of using the word to myself that this is kind of delusional, in the sense that there are, you know, there's this whole sort of narrowing of the view based on, you know, this personal construct or something. But you're reminding me. I mean, you're really reminding me that. I mean, using the word delusional is probably. I mean, that implies that something is a delusion and something isn't a delusion, whereas the kind of whole poetry of it is just a far more useful way, I think, for me to approach that. You know, like it's not that one thing is delusional and another thing isn't. It's that you need to open the door to more fluidity, and poetry helps it, and this whole kind of thing helps it.
I mean, we can, you know, we can say right and wrong and debate whether it's delusional or true or something like that. But actually, if you really wrestle with that, my guess is that you will experience never being able to come to a resolution. It'll just go on and on and on and on and on. And so, you know, sometimes rather than trying to find the unfindable answer, sometimes it's helpful to ask a different question. Just ask a different question. And so sometimes rather than whether it's delusional or not, we could ask ourselves the question, does this work? Is this life enhancing? Is this productive of love? Whatever you want, you know, like whatever your criterion is. I'm not saying this should be your criterion, but you know, is this productive of love and clear seeing? Is this productive of well-being? We engage with all beings in ways that support the integrity, the stability, and the beauty of the entire field of life and living. Does this view help in that direction? Yes? Good, use it. It's no longer helping in that direction. Let go of it. Have another vision, another view. Right? I mean, this idea of as if there's a truth. Imagine for a moment that there is a truth that can be found. And Jenny, this truth is to be found in just outside of Mount Kailash in Tibet. So you'll have to go there. And there's a very small monastery, and actually it's a bit fallen into ruins, and it's not on any of the Lonely Planet guides or anything, and it's hard to find and so on. But in there is the truth. And if you can get the truth, then you could bring back the truth, and you could bring the truth to all of us here in New Zealand. Right? I mean, this is how we often think of truth, as if it were some objective reality that's sitting there waiting for us to discover. Whereas we might actually begin to revamp our understanding and see that actually each moment of living is a collaborative, experimental kind of growing, right? And it just goes on and on and on. And it doesn't sort of, this is all there is in the doing. And we can see that some doings seem to lead to staggering amounts of suffering, right? And some doings lead to less suffering. You know, I remember the Dalai Lama once saying, you know, like if you don't understand the teaching and you don't have time to practice in anything, at least be kind to each other. And then he paused for a moment, and then he actually had a tear came to his eye. This was in Auckland when this happened, and I was sitting quite close to him. I could see this. He was quite moved. There's suddenly a flood of emotion came up. And he said, and if you don't know how to be kind to each other, at least don't harm each other. Right? So he kind of like, and that's a plus too. You know, it's like you kind of, there's pluses, there's views. You say, I'm not quite sure how to live well to uplift everyone, but at least I can be sure that I could do less harm. Sometimes it's not such a bad thing, right? It's not such a kind of low-grade thing. And so, you know, it may be a complete delusion. Imagine for a moment, right, that you just have this complete delusion about yourself and where you are in the world. And that delusion leads you to being kind and loving and open to everyone who's around. Well, that's a fantastic, keep that delusion, right? It's absolutely wonderful, right? And imagine that you have a delusion of being kind and loving, but actually you're quite hateful and so on. Then actually your delusions of loving, being a loving being, maybe you ought to drop that, right? And if you're really dedicated to kind of hatefulness and so on, can you hate in a way that uplifts beings? I mean, you can really do this well, right? In other words, I change the question, like, does it work? Right? And with this, as we start to have the freedom, if you like, to not, in a sense, try and meditate by, I've got some technique that I'm trying to, like the technique is a very narrow path, and you have to kind of walk on this path, and don't fall off the path. Otherwise your mind's wandering, you're distracted, and so back to the meditation, as if this is what I'm doing. Imagine for a moment that what the one technique is actually just walking through the door into the mystery of life and living with love and clear seeing, right? And sometimes it really helps what we call this anapanasati, if you like, or meditating using the breath as a support for meditation, right? It's actually just a support. And when it supports us, deepening in love and clear seeing, we use it. And when it doesn't, we either abandon it or we tweak it. We say, oh, I was taught to meditate here on the tip of my nose, but I feel like following my breath in. Is that okay? Do you have to ask permission for this? Huh? I'd like to finish today with with a poem that is in breathing. And because I think there's some connection between this poem and David Whyte's poem, I'm not going to spend a lot of time kind of making explanation or anything on this. I'd like to just read it, right? And see if this can kind of add to our flow here. I'm going to do my glasses, so thanks. So we're now allowing ourselves to say that we are meditators. We've been talking a bit about meditation, okay? So this poem addresses you. Oh, meditators, are you sure you are meditating? Have you become the great ocean, receiving all the rivers, the tributaries of being? Or do you see yourself as a drip, trying so hard to get somewhere, to be something, to become something? Actually, the nature of drip is not different from ocean. Most drips, unbeknownst to themselves, are oceans, vast worlds teeming with microscopic life. Drips are on the run. Guests who never remain, never feeling quite at home, isolated in their whirling separation, gazing at faces in the concave surfaces of shimmering silver, lives in a bubble, unable to break out. Oceans our hosts, welcoming all who drop in. Vast, loving, open 24 hours per day. This, in all its wonder and vastness and beautiful complexity, just as it is, nothing less and nothing more. It seems so difficult being a drip, a trickle, running tentatively. One single hand can block its way, problems looming all around, and yet, imagine a single hand trying to stop the flow of the Amazon as it enters the sea. Too often, our meditation becomes something to practice, a further distancing of ourselves from the true nature of being. In the name of mindfulness, we split ourselves and become the watcher, watching something else, oh, so perilously close to the critic. We think we are practicing awareness, when closer to truth, awareness is what we are. I wonder if life feels a need to practice living. Through aspiring to awakening and the cultivation of compassion, though aspiring to awakening and the cultivation of compassion, how did we get so far off the track? Pause with me for a moment. I want you to actually do this. Imagine you are holding in your hands. Hold it. Imagine you're holding in your hands a beautiful bowl filled with lustral waters, a nectar of knowing, a potion of caring. Imagine, like, can you feel it? Like, it's got some weight, right? It's just like, feel this. What a strange existence. You in the bowl, you're breathing somewhere else, not you, being watched by you. Have you been there? Now, gently, sensitively, with a tremendous richness of awareness, raise the bowl above your head. Now, tilting the bowl, pour yourself back into yourself. Stay with it for a moment. Can you feel the difference? Nectar cascading down, moistening every cell, aliveness, immediacy, breathing and knowing intimately mingled in this ocean of mystery. We are all leaky vessels, cracked bowls leaking all over the world, leaving a trail of puddles behind us, more and more scattered, more and more diffused, until we begin to feel a bit empty and dried up. A bit of mindless chatter runs out here. A bit of planning next year dribbles out there. A bit of envy, criticism, anger, confusion. We're running away in all directions. Can you pause and gather yourself back into the bowl? The bowl is our remembering. our sati, our mindfulness. It does little good collecting dust on the shrine. It's a tool, a bailing tin to save a space-borne ship, not to empty the vessel, but to pour the ocean into it, to sink it, to shipwreck this drip into the origin of all being. Have courage, bail for your life. Buckets of ocean, ballast to sink you to the depths of life fully lived. Use it, use it, use it again. Scoop yourself up. Bring back each escaped part. Use your hands, or a squeegee, or a mop, anything that will help you to remember the work, and then pour yourself back into yourself and continue in richness. In time, you will know that you can do this and will know it to be good. At that time, then, gathering all that you are, one fluid whole, pour yourself back into the world. The drip returns to the sea. The sea becomes great seeing. Compassion working wonderfully, a natural presence gifting itself, a rich dance of knowing, your offering to the world. I haven't read this poem for a long time, but it brought back memories when I actually used it a lot. I said, look, this is really serious. You've got to do this, you know. And so people were. Sometimes you need something that's like brings some physicality into it. It's kind of like, here it is, this nectar in this beautiful bowl. This is the bowl in Amitabha's lap, right? This lustral waters of caring, a nectar of knowing, a potion of caring, this caring and sharing, right? Gathering all of me, right? Carved by the carver's hands, this uniqueness, right? And then pouring myself back into myself, and for a moment, you're kind of knowing this to be good. And then dribble, 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 drip, drip, slop, 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 and you kind of, the bowl kind of moves through life, and it's like a cracked vessel, right? And it dribbles out a bit of envy here, and a bit of criticism there, and a bit of verbalizing there, and a bit of hope and fear, and blah, 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 yeah, right? Right? And the next thing you know, you feel like your bowl is there, and you're exhausted and burnt out and empty. Right? And so then, what do you do? What do you do? And so what's the point in having this beautiful bowl, right? Your remembrance, your awareness, your sati, right? If you don't use it. So you got to kind of, first of all, you got to get yourself back into your remembrance, into your awareness, right? Use a mop, use a squeegee, use a technique, use a meditation, do a retreat, read a book, write some poetry, paint a picture, do some gardening, whatever helps you to like gather yourself back into the bowl. And then you're starting to just realize it's there. And it's strange though, because you're kind of looking at you, but somehow you're outside the bowl looking at you. And it's kind of a weird thing. And then you kind of very gently, so you don't want to lose it, you bring it up and tilt the bowl and pour yourself back into yourself. And continue. Okay? And we continue with this until it begins to make sense that you're no longer, in a sense, pouring yourself back into yourself, but you're pouring yourself into the world as the world is pouring itself into you. And I don't know if we could sort of, this was in there was a section called Afterward, after a whole lot of lovely, detailed instruction on how to do breathing meditation. You got this, right? And it's like, I don't know how we can turn that into a technique particularly, you know what I mean? It's kind of hard to, techniques are good because you can sort of say, step one, do this, step two, do that. If you did it correctly, you should get the result. This doesn't work that way. Poetry works. It's poetic. And so I'm hoping that in the course of our time together, it's kind of experimental. I mean, you may feel an urge to share. Sometimes something has come up, and it's like a number of people have found that it's almost like to talk about their meditation experience is easier to kind of share some poetry that sort of emerged because it kind of touches on something that's much more real than, or somehow viscerally real, you know what I mean, than just the, I experienced this and that and the other, and you stick a label on it. Was this the fourth Arupa jhana, or was this the, as if somehow if we label it, we've got it. And no, we want this. So I think that's beginning of a gathering, some gatherings, right? And it may be that, for example, that it's quite lovely to be able to share poetry with people who you feel are appreciating your poetry. I mean, the opposite is obvious. It's like you come out with this great poem and everyone's sitting there, yeah, so what? It's like you just feel polluted. You sort of like you don't want to. Most people don't want to share their poetry. They don't want to share the creativity that is their being because it's a working process and it's not yet finished. And somehow you have this idea that you should be sharing perfected, finished work. And even when we say, oh, it's a work in process, it's not yet finished, we say that kind of trying to make excuses. But actually, that's real. That's life. Is a work not yet finished. So what's sometimes nice is that you might like to bring maybe someone here who especially, I don't know how we're going to do this with the people who are joining us from all over the lot via the internet. But here, when we're finished here, we've shared some poetry, and then we'll share some food, and we'll kind of eat substances with each other. Sometimes I think this is the most important part of the Sunday, right? Is when we get to eat, right? But you might actually sit down with one person who you feel an affinity to, if there's such a person, and perhaps in the space, share a poem. Right? I mean, I like the idea of sharing poetry rather than, it's not a kind of a form of, poets do it. I mean, they're doing that all the time. But I'm talking about ordinary people who haven't realized that actually all beings are poets. That your life is your poetry. This is my poetry. So there's also, we might have an opportunity of actually a little bit more actually sharing of our creative work with each other. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
By the power of these wholesome activities, may our lives be rich with awakening. Living thus, may we abandon all unwholesomeness. In the very midst of this extraordinary mystery of birthing and growing and surrendering to the carver's hands and kind of having a grain come up to the surface and celebrating our flaws, right, and offering the bowl of our life, right? May we, in the midst of all of this, may we help all beings to realize their true interbeing nature. Sarvamangalam, Sarvamangalam, Sarvamangalam. Thank you. Thank you.